I'll be honest. T1 really started to piss me off. they're just pissing me off. Like they're just doing like all I can see is like, you know, like, oh, have you guys seen Zoolander? Like when they're trying to like they're trying to hypnotize him in Zoolander,
yeah.
right? Mugatu, and like all he sees is like Mugatu spinning head and this music in the background. All I see is David Dennis's head spinning around and just seeing like images of Arnstein Sniper just like withering away on an academy team that can't compete, and I'm just relax, don't do it. Oh. All right, let's talk about some roster changes here because we had a couple over multiple different regions, and the first one I want to talk about is the wholesale changes that Built by Gamers have made. They hadn't made this, and obviously these roster changes sort of, you could argue they precipitated in part their victory, the upset win over Sentinels recently. So they dropped Foe, or Fur, if we're going to use the proper pronunciation of it, I guess. Right, Van Silly, right?
Right, Foe,
yeah.
but his pronunciation is definitely Foe still, yeah.
Okay, so Foe leaves. Poach gets added. Now, we wondered what the hell was going on with Poach for quite some time. He was with Andbox and was probably one of the pioneers in North America of Viper play. A lot of people sort of, you know, I think even we said looked up to Poach and, you know, wanted to try and adapt some of his play style. So Poach comes in theoretically as IGL playing the Omen, and Raka gets added as a Jet duelist. So new look BBG, and I mean, things go a little wrong for them sort of later on in the PC. I think they lose to Exet in the first round and then lose to version 1. But it was a qualifiers, I think, for VCT where they looked really quite good. And yeah, obviously the win against Sentinels, where it was an upset, or maybe it was a fluke, or maybe just a one-off, it was still pretty impressive. They were very, very good at applying pressure across the map.
Definitely. I think congratulations to those two players to get officially signed by BBG after that. What's good about at least for BBG is that despite them losing to Exit into version 1, they still don't have to go through the gauntlet, right, of the open qualifiers into Challengers 2. So that is going to be some room to breathe, some room for these two players to continue to evolve with this roster. And with Poach's mind, we're probably going to be able to see some more upsets from BBG going into the Challengers too. And I do get it with what you were saying, Aubrey. If we was looking at the Poach, maybe that's why we also started seeing some different things from like the Viper that Poach was doing too on Icebox before.
Yeah, I mean, he was in it was an interview and Run It Back, I think, where they talked to him about sort of some of his inspirations. So I thought that was quite interesting. Poach obviously is an IGL. Speaking of IGLs, G2, they sit Zeke, or they drop him, and then Aussie is announced as a stand-in to operate as their IGL, which to me is such an insane concept, obviously, to use a stand-in player as an in-game leader. Mitch, how to get your take on this one here? Because it seems to have, so far, at least in VCT 2, in Challengers 2 rather, has served G2 fairly well.
These guys look better than they ever have, hands down. Like with, I don't know exactly what changed. Obviously, they've had a lot of time to adapt, but for the longest time, since the beginning of this G2 roster, we have said they need an IGL. We always called into question for how long can the way that they're playing actually work, because yes, you have a lot of players who know the game intimately. They can make calls themselves, but when it's such a loose environment where whoever feels it is making that call, you can never really be as structured and efficient as you want to be as a professional team. So with Aussie coming in, I had some high hopes that there was going to be some changes, but Jesus, they played so good. It was unbelievable. And it's not just down to, oh, they were winning, they won the games. That's great. It's like they literally had Heretic's playbook. They were ready for everything these guys did. And like, I've never, ever seen G2 anti-strat someone. Like, I've seen them destroy them with aim. I've seen them overly aggress to the point that it's ridiculous and it worked, but I've never seen them just systematically tear apart a game plan like they did in that game. And I'm a really big fan of this change, but when we interviewed Aussie, he was saying that at the moment, so Zeke, from my understanding at least, Zeke is not like officially gone. He's just sitting out of this one. So I think there might be some health reasons behind that. And Aussie was brought in because they needed someone last minute to jump in. But he's such a good fit for this team from what we can see on the outside anyways, and from speaking with them, that I would be surprised if he doesn't stay on. I think this is a really good change for G2. And now it's just down to them to figure out. Even Aussie said that his future on this team is like there's conversations going on. They're figuring it out. But as of right now, he doesn't even know how long he'll be with them.
This is consistent with how they dealt with David P in the early days as well, because he was a stand-in for the longest time when everyone was like, oh, I mean, turns out guys, end up leaving the team anyway, and turns out he's kind of a shitter, but that's a whole nother story. But I mean, they went quite a long time without sort of announcing him, and he was sort of trying out, I think, for the team for ages. But we also got to see Fnatic play Reina on a couple of maps now, I guess, without Zeke in the lineup, and
Looks
I
good.
looked around, yeah, it looked. I mean, I mean, Split was a curious map, I think, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting change for obviously the previous sort of Omen player. It's nice to see the change up for G2. Maybe it's just a breath of fresh air, but yeah, we're all wondering about the longevity of this particular arrangement, especially if Zeke is only out for. Do we know? Sorry, Mitch. Do we know why Zeke is sitting out?
I'm not sure. I think I know, but I'm not sure if it's public knowledge the exact reason. From what I understand, it's a health issue with him at the moment, that he's not feeling too good, so he couldn't go to the boot camp anyways with them, feeling as ill as he did. So, but I don't know if because Zeke coming in, obviously he's a very fresh addition, and that was to fix a problem, and that problem was not fixed. But
Yep.
it's been such a short window for them to really mess around with it. There's a strong possibility that they still believe that that's going to be the better avenue, because when you take a player out, put someone else in, there's going to be an adjustment period, and especially because they're already trying to deal with the IGLing situation. From what I understand, when Zeke came in, we even thought he was coming in as an IGL, but it was actually him sharing the role with Mixwell, and they were the ones mostly calling, but it was still a very loose and relaxed environment. Whereas with Ozzy, he's come in and they have said to him, we want you to IGL, we want you to lead this team. To me, that's a very strange thing to say to a stand-in. If you're getting a stand-in, you don't change the whole dynamic of your team for a very important tournament.
Yeah. I think overall, even looking at G2, because as they were as dominant when TSM was back then in the beta days, now we were struggling to figure out where G2 was going to be when, one, they're not even qualifying, or two, they're losing in the quarterfinals, just like TSM kind of is doing right now. They're not really at that top level yet. So now that they finally qualify into the main stage for VCT Challengers 2, it's oof, we could breathe a little bit, but it's still not where we expect G2 to be yet, right? If they lose out in the first round of main stage, it's it seems we accept it right now, which kind of sucks. I want to see them back on the top. And looking at how their latest addition, Aussie, was for the team, it looked pretty good. It was in the right direction. Like you said, Mitch, it was a little bit messy to look at Split overall. It looked pretty okay but seeing Mixwell on a raise was kind of different for me, because I felt like that some abilities weren't as fluid as when he was playing that Jet, but it did work. They still got the victory. So I think, again, if they're on the right track, would you keep Aussie at this point? I would like to. I would like to.
Yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do if your Zeke is out there? Yeah, I mean, if Zeke has, look, if it's health issues, especially if it's, dare I say, pandemic related as well, it's a whole nother story. Like Dapper this week, I don't know if you see this, but Dapper has actually tweeted. He said, honestly, I think I have COVID.
Oh shit.
But someone was like, mate, what the fuck? They are doing free vaccinations in Texas right now, right down the road from me, basically. And he's like, oh yeah, procrastination, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's because he said he can't taste anything, right? Which is a very commonly associated symptom of COVID. So for fuck's sake, mate, go, please go and get jabs, please.
I mean, look, he's got Flintstone multivitamins. He says it's fine. It'll be okay.
Yep, no, the gummy ones are fucking lit. It's 70 calories per gummy, and you need to have 3 of them. So it's really, it's just really great. Let's talk about some breaking news here, because Cloud9 White just announced that they're parting ways with Katie. So obviously this is not long after they picked her up. She's performed extremely well with her. Yeah, they won Game Changers. The only hint that I have is that when we talked with Mel, she sort of said that, because I think Alexis and Katie, I think those two, or was it Jazzy as well?
Cool.
I don't know. Yeah,
Alexis and Jazzykins, yeah.
Right. Okay. So maybe not Katie in this case, but she said that they are busy juggling their education as well as playing, and I have to I've had to help them out on occasion, or in terms of just finding lineups for them or whatever. So I don't. it's kind of weird, to be honest. The thank you graphic they can knock up in a couple seconds, so it doesn't necessarily mean they prepared it. But the statement is so brief. You know what I mean? When you see these goodbyes, like we've decided to part ways, we wish them all the best. You know what I mean? It's oh, yeah, I do have to wonder what happened. I don't want to gloat, but I did sort of, yeah, we have been talking in the past about how these 6-player rosters are always kind of cursed, right? Always kind of doomed in a way.
Yeah, yeah. Even looking at Katie with like even her interview and at the Game Changers when they won, it was like, man, she has so much confidence with the team, and it looks like the team is gonna go pretty far with this roster. The only thing that I could think of is that maybe she got an offer that was better, and not necessarily better for Cloud9 and Game Changers, but it's like just competing at like the I don't know, with like a mixed team or whatnot, where she wants to maybe look and explore further than the Game Changers and whatnot too. So that could be a possibility. A possibility there. Sorry, or it's also the fact that she might want to go back to CS because that's where she came from. That's a game that she also enjoys playing. So it could be a change of heart to be like, after playing this competition, I've achieved it, and now it's time to go back to CS. I don't know. It just happened, right? So we don't have any news of what is the reasoning of why she departed with Cloud9.
I think that there's always I mean, let's be straight here. We made changes over at Alliance after making Masters, and it was a very peculiar thing. It was very much debated on why that happens, and it's not always apparent from the outset. Like, a player can perform really well, but there's so many different things that can happen. Like, you can have attitude problems with them. They could just not fit, like in the work ethic, especially if you're running a 6-man roster. You think about, you're getting a direct comparison of what you have and what you can have. You're putting in new players. Maybe the mood is just better. Maybe they like motivate you more. Maybe they play off their teammates a bit better. They make you perform. There's so many things that can happen that can put you in a spot where you just feel like, you know what, I think the team overall is going to be better with this lineup than with the one that has someone, you know, fragging out like an animal. And I think, you know, Ozzy is a good example of that, where we know it's because he's IGLing and stuff, but I'm saying when it comes down to personality traits, they're not going to talk about that. It doesn't shine through the same way. And if you put it on paper, Ozzy versus Zeke is a far better individual player, and yet Ozzy will be better for the team potentially in the long run. So it's one of those things, it's impossible to ever know unless you're on the inside.
Yeah, and obviously, Yinsu mentioned in the chat, she beat me to the punch. She reached out to Dream and asked, and he didn't have much to add at the time. What do you think about like a Gen G picking up KD, like an Owa, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know, like what teams are, you know, if we're trying to think about teams that didn't quite get us, because I think CLG,
Dignitas maybe.
Yeah, Dignitas, because I think like definitely feel like the top 3 teams in Game Changers are pretty solid, right? But I know like the Gen G team didn't really do as well as they would have liked to. Dignitas also, you know, a little bit slumped from them. I wonder. Yeah, I mean, and the abruptness of this definitely. I don't know. I mean, it's Cloud9, so I would love to know like if there's like a buyout associated with this, like when they sign Katie, because it feels like, honestly, I don't think it's fair to compare like 2 players of different genders in this case. But Katie reminded me in that scene, in the, you know, of like a kind of TenZ player, right? Like statistically above and beyond the rest of the field. You would think that Cloud9, being the enterprising people, you know, they love money, people that they are in terms of how they run their teams, would stick a buyout on Kate like that, or just, you know, make it a little bit hard to for teams to acquire her so easily, considering that she was probably like one of the most prominent figures in you know, at least in women's Valorant that we'd seen so far.
I don't know where she go. I think it'll be nice to look at. I mean, like right now she's still playing a lot. She's still tweeting it a lot that she's playing some Valorant. So I think it could be good news for Katie. Even good news for Cloud9. Another win-win situation as if we're gonna run business-wise with Cloud9 and where Katie could potentially end up.
I think I have a quick question actually, Uber, for you, because coming from Overwatch, I think you guys had more experience with like deeper rosters, like if you need 5 having 6, if you need 6 having 7, stuff like that, than in Counter-Strike, which has only been a brand new thing, and the same in Valorant EU. It's like non-existent more or less for Heretics. And I do wonder, when you sign somebody under those conditions, because if you're signed into a 5-man roster, buyouts are going to be they're going to be there 100%, because if you lose that player, your team falls apart, and that player has security because he's on the starting lineup. If there's 6, though, you're running the risk of being kind of cast aside. If they go, oh, we prefer this other one. It's almost like, I know it isn't, and it's not how it should really be looked at if you're signing on to this kind of project, but it's almost like a long-term trial, like in some aspects, or could end up being that way. So I wonder if it's like less likely if you're going to sign a surplus of players to assign them buyouts, or at least high ones. I don't know. That's a very weird area for me to contemplate.
Yeah, a great question. Orgs in Overwatch have just had a lot of them have handled it differently. Dallas feels a good example of a team that just like, I mean, I got blocked by Hastro like 3 years ago for just ripping into him for some of the signing decisions that he made, because it just didn't make any sense, because he signed players and he sat them on the bench for a year. And like,
Nice.
How do you feel? Like, it's nice to make money, but I don't think that like at the core of it, these pro players in especially if they come from developed regions, or like they have like relatively stable family situations, they're not doing it just for the money. So like, you can't just fucking sit these guys on the bench and then just pay them a salary and expect them to be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And that was a problem with a lot of people. Like, ask AKM now, obviously playing on OG. He rode the pine over the rainbow. That guy was sat on that fucking bench for so long. And he was quite a good player, but I honestly think that Hastro signed him because he was French and he was popular, and that was it. There was no like rhyme or reason as to why he fit into that team. Hangzhou Spark are coming into the Overwatch League with, I want to say, a 12-player roster right now. I would wager that only 9 of them ever get to play at all this year.
12.
Stop.
Correct me if I'm
12
wrong.
players.
There are 6 players who play, right?
Yeah.
What?
You nailed it, bitch.
What?
You nailed it. You're on the ball, mate. Yeah. So theoretically, these 6 players are a like scrim partner. Fuck off. Like, teams are going to scrim each other anyway. Like, you're not going to want to scrim the same 6 people after a while. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah.
Weird.
So there is an abundance of sort of extraneous players here, and they're all getting paid, right? So that's great. You know, that's, if you are really desperately need money and you don't really have a competitive desire or whatever, then okay, maybe it's okay for you. But I don't know too many players that are satisfied with that, and that's why we always sort of speculate on this show.
Like Jeremy
I don't know
Lin
about
and the Toronto Raptors still get a ring.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, brilliant. You know what I mean? I don't know. Well, yeah. Well, this is why it feels like we fucking talk about this every week. It's like one of those topics that's not really central to like Valorant in general, but always comes up. These teams just don't stick with these 6 players. And yeah, if you're a 6 player, if you're a bench player, you're fucking hoping that team courts you. You're hoping for one opportunity to show yourself and then a chance to get out there, because it could also be politics as well. Like you mentioned it, Mitch. Maybe the C9 White preferred not playing with Katie. Maybe like she came in and had this frag potential, but there was more chemistry the other way around, or maybe like there's a coachability question. Yeah, you probably just hope that you get picked up. Speaking of this, I mean, we do need to move on because we're already 45 minutes.
I was going to say, if anything, sign 5 more players and then call them an academy team.
Oh, speaking of, that's a fucking great segue. T1 have just announced their academy team. No, you're not seeing things. Yes, organizations cannot field the same like 2 fucking rosters in like a Riot sanctioned tournament, but T1 have decided to build an academy roster. They put Ansan Sniper on here. Obviously, he was announced to their main roster, and you know, he maybe still be just acclimating to Valorant and might still be developing. I actually don't know what kind of player he's in Valorant at all. It would be disingenuous for me to like be mad that he's not on the main roster just based on what he did in Overwatch. Not a lot of names that I'm really familiar with here, but am I right in saying that like these guys would only be able to compete in like
monthlies,
Street Gamers monthlies?
Yeah.
Where's the fucking return on investment in this project? Can I ask?
You're trying to build an academy roster. Okay, why? Well, because you want to sell that roster or sell players, right? Because you can't have them both competing at a tier 1 level. Can't happen. So, okay, those are the 2 things. Where the fuck are they supposed to show themselves off? Like, you've basically got 5 players and went, you cannot compete in the biggest tournaments. Unlucky. Like, okay, again, you know, as we just talked about, you're getting a salary. Fantastic. Well done. But you're not going to be able to establish yourself as a tier 1 player. You're going to have to be a god in those community tournaments, because it feels to me like when you look at a situation like that, you're motivating players. Don't give a fuck about your teammates. You play the best you can so that someone else is going to pick you up. And we see that in VCT and stuff. When players get dropped from their teams, they make mixes with other players so that they can hopefully put on a good performance and someone else will pick them up. For an org to do that, though, I don't see that as a benefit. I can't see it paying off at all in the long term.
I'll be honest. T1 are really starting to piss me off. they're just pissing me off. Like they're just doing like all I can see is like, you know, like, oh, have you guys seen Zoolander? Like when they're trying to like they're trying to hypnotize him in Zoolander,
yeah.
right? Mugatu,
Relax.
and like all he sees is like Mugatu spinning head and this music in the background. All I see is David Dennis's head fucking spinning around and just seeing like images of Arnstein Sniper just like withering away on an academy team that can't compete, and I'm just relax, don't do it. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, okay. So maybe they're hoping that this is something that they can build. So a couple things. It could be a farm team. They want to develop these players and maybe, you know, give them the chance to move up into the main roster. It could also be a team that they could sell as a package deal if they get some good results. I mean, they're not going to get to go up against good competition, are they? Because they're not going to play in VCTs. So fair enough. Or you know, they want a scrim partner. Maybe no one wants to fucking scrim the main T1 roster because they're shite. I don't know. Like maybe they, you know what I mean?
That was
fuck, man. I don't know. I'm just annoyed. So many of these decisions just don't make sense to me. And I'm not on the inside, so you know they could all be like completely fucking realistic, and they could just be like throwing darts at a picture of my face on the back of their door, like this fucking guy.
But even then, right? You look at their academy team. They had like
I'm trying to sort of be an advocate for some of these decisions and you know work them through with you guys, but it's hard to see an end game with announcing an academy team that are male.
Yeah. I was gonna say sorry, and I muted myself on Discord, but like I if you look at the old T1 academy team as well, it's like Kurt that ended up playing with like Tymin. Then you have Rara that ended up playing with Dignitas, Rep Dignitas at that roster. But then you also have EU that joined NRG, and he's doing very well with NRG right now. So there is that possibility that with that T1 academy team could be like a lower tier level of where Immortals was kind of at, where they were signing Asuna Dicey, selling him off, Kohler signing him off, and having that revolving door as the main roster. While as for the T1 Academy team, then it's farming up, practicing with the main roster, and building up that experience to farm those players to maybe get more income and cash flow to maybe get star players for T1. So maybe it's a long term plan for T1 to finally build a super team in Valorant, but who knows for how long.
Yeah, the problem for me is that you're almost like sealing the fate of those players. And look, I can't blame them at all, because if you're in a position where you have no offers or this offer, you take that offer. Of course you do. You want the money and you want to be able to continue pursuing your passion. It's fair enough. But for T1, I just don't see the end game there that's worth having these guys. Like the main way that you would establish yourself is by playing in VCT, is by making it through those open qualifiers and establishing yourself as a team that can actually compete. Then an organization can pick you up, or maybe a team will pick you up as an individual if they see you playing well. But when you can't compete against top tier teams, they're never going to go, oh, that guy's really good. Like I know there was over in Counter-Strike a while back, the current FPX roster, or they were godsent when I knew them really well. I was like traveling around with them for a bit. We did a couple of the events, and I remember chatting with them. I was like, listen, dude, they picked up a guy called Madden. I had never heard of this guy ever in my life. I'd done all the open qualifiers and stuff for ESL, never fucking seen his name. And we were just in a bar one day, and I was like, dude, who the fuck are you? Like, how did they find you? How did Michael Lele end up going Madden? Like, where'd your name come from? Turns out they played in a qualifier against each other before they were even streamed games. So it was like really early stages. And he dropped like 50 kills against them. Then when they needed a new player, they were like, what about that dude that might have been cheating? Like, let's get him. He played. They were like, he's not cheating and he's really good. Okay. And he got picked up. You don't have that option now, which is probably one of the main ways to make a name for yourself now in Valorant. So at least they're getting a paycheck.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a good start. It's a good start no matter what.
No, it's not a good start, because you fucking cap your progress. You put a ceiling above your head, been like, well, can't get into VCT, so I guess we'll just stay here in the kiddie pool. I don't know. I patiently await.
I guess just for
I'm
branding.
not patient. I await to see more news about that one. We're going to keep moving very quickly, Mitch. People, I'm going to get roasted by Chaff. We don't talk about Dirk and the Magnum Dong. So very quickly, can you give us a rundown of some of Fnatic's roster changes? Because I'm going to get fucking... can't believe these guys are fucking ignoring the Fnatic roster changes. We don't have any graphics for that, so give us the 5-0.
All right, so Durka first of all went to the same school as Yampy, which was a fact that Sue was passing on to us, which is insane. Two of the best oppers are coming out of the same school. But so he's come into this roster. He's an insanely strong fragger. I'm not entirely sure for Fnatic why the changes they made were made. Like they look very strong right now. Don't get me wrong. This roster is very nice to look at. Just Magnum, very strong player as well. But at the same time, the guys that they let go were solid as can be, Jack and Mo40, and I think that it's a new face, it's a new approach. They wanted they needed to change something, I guess, because the results weren't really in line. Like we were talking about Fnatic wanting to be a top 3 team, hands down. I think it's similar to what we've said about Liquid for a long time, which is that they're not a shit team. They're not a team that you're going to be like, oh, they don't have a chance of beating anybody. But if you're Liquid and you're looking at those results, you're like, what the fuck am I paying for? This is not my brand. So for Fnatic, it makes sense they're changing it over. They're insane. Like Durka, or as I mistakenly called him, Derek, but he's given me permission to call him that forever, so appreciate it. He could definitely be up there as one of the top 5 in Europe a couple of months from now. Like when I was watching him, he was blowing my mind with some of the jet plays he was making.
Gotcha. Well, yeah. So we'll keep an eye and see how Fnatic develop. Obviously, yeah, we're going to see some bunch of fresh memes come out of Europe now, I guess, with all this co-streaming happening. I wondered, like, one person, like, why the fuck is it? What's all these Pepes? Why? And I realized that it was because of the Pansy Hypox stream. So thanks, guys. I mean, shit. Had I done that in Overwatch, I'd probably just get banned and ejected from the community. I'd have a Kotaku article written up immediately. I wouldn't be allowed in the Blizzard Arena. I wouldn't be allowed in 10 feet of Jeff Kaplan. So nice. That seems fun. I mean, yeah, I'm not jealous at all. Okay, we got to talk about TenZ here because Sentinels and TenZ is a developing story. We're getting some conflicting information from, but what we can say is that they are going to be using TenZ through the end of Challengers finals. I assume it's all of the challenges because they didn't say Challengers 2 finals. Either way, it looks like this lease, this loan, so to speak, is being extended.
Yeah, they're gonna go until the end. I think at that point it's been confirmed, which is great. I mean, they're still trying to find their fifth player, right? So to have TenZ right now, they had some great results. As we were talking before of TenZ getting banned, or like let's say if he was a Jet that had to get banned, he still plays a very great Reyna, as we saw in Icebox 2. I think Sentinels with TenZ continues to be that #1 team in North America, so it only makes sense. The only thing is how much it costs.
Yeah, you can imagine the buyout's pretty good.
5 million, by the way. 5 million.
Apparently.
5 million? That is, I mean, I don't know what these numbers are like. To be fair, Cloud9 operate a pretty successful League of Legends franchise, and I would say some of the numbers are probably informed by like the buyouts in League, which you could argue is maybe not reasonable considering where Valorant is as opposed to where League of Legends is. But maybe this is why TenZ was saying that he wasn't we got to stop. We'll run this for you here anyway. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but this is what TenZ had to say before this announcement was made. So this is why I'm confused about this whole thing. Check it out.
So I think with my situation too, I think I'll only be playing with Sentinels again if I get acquired by them long term. I don't think they're looking for like a short-term option. So if they can't acquire me, I think they'll probably go with someone else for qualifier 2. But I know some talks are happening.
Right.
I get it now. I get it.
Okay.
5 million for TenZ. Katie also left the roster probably for a buyout too, because they had to pay back all the money that they spent for the fucking Colossus team that they tried to build in CS:GO.
Oh no. Okay, listen. Just I hate that Henry G is getting shit because he revealed how much his players are getting paid because he wanted to set a precedent. Every other team saw that, like, oh, thanks for giving us a good idea of what we shouldn't pay our players, but we're not going to reveal our fucking players' salaries. Off you fucking go, Multi Colossus. I mean, that project was arguably a failed endeavor, which is a shame because I love Henry dearly.
Me too.
But motherfucker needs to go and get a pedicanoss or something. You know what I mean? For fuck's sake, have a holiday. Mate. Look like you've been stuck inside for fucking months. You can only listen to Morrissey on repeat in a dark room for so many years before you start to lose your mind. But anyway, so the buyout. When I first heard, I think it was Fion, Tyler Erzberger, who initially tweeted 2 million, and I'm like, $2 million. That's a lot of money. Wow. For a player, mind you, that won't necessarily stay with your org. Like, I understand Cloud9 would like to recoup their investment in TenZ, but hasn't that already happened? Like, how much did they really spend on TenZ in the first place? They got very fortunate by unearthing to get him to come across from Counter-Strike, right? How much
exactly. They got him for CS:GO. So like, I don't think when he was signed into CS:GO, he was like a prodigy player. Like he just first joined, was like, hey, here's a prodigy player, an up and comer, kind of like what Brax was in the iBuyPower days. He's gonna be like the new face of Cloud9. Kind of even like what Zeppa was after TenZ kind of left into Valorant, and they brought in Zeppa into that roster. So I don't think that the salary was that high for TenZ to get in the first place, and he kept him within CS to Valorant. So I don't know. I mean, stonks.
I think the thing that from their perspective as well, though, like when you're risking in capital on players again and again, and maybe they don't work out, and I think that Counter-Strike is a good example. Like they've invested a lot of money, they didn't get the payback, so they really need to like maximize how much you're getting out of them. But 5 million's a lot if that's it. I heard around the place that maybe it was like that the exact quote was like up to 5 million, so maybe it's like below it somewhere, but even
4.7.
4, yeah. That's more reasonable. Let me get my wallet.
I got a couple. Got some spare change in the back pocket. I can make it up. You got change for a 20 or what? Fucking hell. Okay. I mean, if you're Sentinels, I mean, in fairness, you've done pretty well for yourself as an org. If you think about it, you had a Fortnite world champion. So that's also pretty good. I think you're champions in Halo currently. You've had very good results in Valorant so far. I mean, if you think about how quickly this team has managed to grow, it was only a couple of years ago that this brand was incepted. It was Phoenix One, who rebranded, who took the day-to-day operations of the Los Angeles Gladiators and Overwatch League, and then they started developing sort of streamers and teams. So a very quick rise. But I don't, who knows what the fucking balance sheet looks like for this team, or how you can justify a $5 million investment. That basically means you would want to turn around and make TenZ sign a fucking 10-year contract, and then be like, well, we've got to make our money back on you somehow. So now you're indentured in servitude to us for basically eternity. You can sit in the seventh circle of hell chained to an ice pillar, and we're going to get our money out of you.
His value is pretty high as a streamer too, right? Like even if he's not competing, his stream viewers.
It's not super tangible though. How do you quantify? Because obviously you're not taking any of the streamers' earnings. This is very rare. What Cloud9 do is you might be a part of their network, but what happens is your revenue goes through them and comes to you in full, but their balance sheets display that increase of revenue as a result of bringing you on board. So they don't get paid your stream revenue. You get it all, but they look like they get it, and then they pay it to you as a separate invoice. That's quite often how it works with these networks. That's why orgs sometimes sign streamers, because it's a boost to their analytics for sponsors, and it also, in the case of big streamers, it plumps the shit out of their balance sheets at the end of the day. It's pretty common if you're, I know this because I was part of the ESL network for ages. The problem was I'd left ESL, and then for 2 years I was still stuck on your fucking network on Twitch. So all of my revenue went to ESL, and I wasn't working for ESL anymore. Fuck, the person managing my partnership with ESL wasn't even there anymore. So all of my stream revenue was going to ESL, all of it. So I had to literally get on a very long email chain. I had to invoke the name of Joe Miller to fucking get my money. You know what I mean? So that's how it works, right? When you're signed to a network on Twitch. Anyway, so it's not, I don't know, it's pretty intangible, I think, how you sort of recoup this particular investment from a player. I just think that if it's 5 million, it's only going to get more if he keeps playing better. Like, this is how negotiation works. The better TenZ plays, the more leverage Cloud9 have, because they're not in a hurry to sign him. TenZ doesn't want to play with this current Cloud9 roster. They don't want him to play with the current Cloud9 roster. So Cloud9 hold all the cards, you know what I mean? Or in a game of Uno, none of them. So I don't know. I don't envy the Sentinels here, because they've been put in a difficult position, and the more they use TenZ, the more expensive. Normally when you lease something, it gets cheaper to buy at the end. You know what I mean? This is not one of those situations.
I don't envy TenZ, because he's the one that's stuck between all of this, right? Because he really wants to play with Sen, and he can. And if he can't play, and he cannot play with Cloud9, then he can't compete. He could still stream, but I think he really wants to. He's back at that drive to want to compete and win events, and that's the sucky part for him. He's stuck in between that whole business kind of disposal.
Give you the worst case scenario as well. Let's say he doesn't go with them. He ends up getting picked up by another team, or has to play going back. Then all of a sudden he's going to be in this position where he's like, if the results don't follow, if they're not making masters, if they're not competing at a high level, he'll be like, if these fuckers that'll let me go over there
Yeah.
I'd be winning this shit. So it could ruin his mentality as well. Like there's a lot that he's going through right now.
Exactly.
I wonder. I feel like one of the worst things that could have happened to Sentinels was for them to win Masters with TenZ. That might actually be the worst thing that could have happened.
I mean, that's why that's why the rumor is 5 mil now instead of 1 when he was fucking first loaned out the fucking play.
You know what? They did not make 4 million from winning Masters. I'll give you the big tip. So that is a net negative for the fucking org. This is what I'm trying to say. I don't know.